Hey guys, welcome to Photoshop 2021. I am just going to briefly kind of show you around and give you some tips on how to simply edit your photos ready to turn in for Artsonia. Okay, so the first thing you're going to do is you're going to go to Open over here and you're going to locate your pictures that you want to upload. So I've already seen, you can see down here that I've already kind of done this a few times, but I'm going to go ahead and pull open both folders that I have, and I'm going to grab two different pictures, and there's a reason why I'm going to grab both of them. Typically, I would tell you just to upload one at a time. Well, here's what I want to show you. When I first was looking at my pictures, I started editing this one, and it took me a minute to realize that it's not what I wanted. So if you look carefully, look where my focal point is on my graham crackers. So currently, the focal point is back here in the back half of the graham cracker. Well, that doesn't quite make much sense. Let's switch to this picture. And even though it's a different angle, I much prefer this one because the focus is on the marshmallow and the front half of the graham of the s'more. So it's much nicer to look at as far as editing is concerned. Okay, so I am going to show you how you can get this blurred effect in Photoshop without having your phone capable of doing that. So if you look, you can see it's kind of blurred everywhere. Now, what Photoshop can't do is it can't unblur something. So we can alter an image, we can blur it, but we can't really fix what didn't happen in a camera to begin with. So we can't magically make something in focus that wasn't already in focus. Okay, so let's go back up here to my good image, and we're going to go ahead and color correct this one. Now I will say that the color overall looks pretty good. Our whites look white, our browns look brown, but you never know. So what we are going to do is going to go up to image and adjustments, and there's a few things that I want you to be able to use. You can use brightness and contrast, you can use exposure, and we'll talk about color balance and maybe even hue and saturation. This one won't really affect us on this project nearly as much. Okay, so the first thing I can do is go to brightness and contrast, and I'll show you what that does. So pumping up the brightness or pulling it down. I actually sort of enjoy it pulled down because the marshmallow over here still looks really white. So I might actually keep it a little bit on the darker side. And then contrast basically pulls all your whites and your blacks and really makes them pop. Or you take it away and it's a very neutral image. So I usually like to add a touch of contrast, but not too much. So I'm going to go ahead and say okay. All right, so the next thing I can do is I can go in to look at exposure. Exposure is almost like correcting what didn't happen in your camera as far as lighting is concerned. So I can add exposure, or I can take it away. It is very similar to brightness and contrast. However, it is a touch different. So I know they might give you a similar effect, but if you were to, do two screens side by side and do the two different tools, you would notice a touch of a difference. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and leave that there. The next thing I'm going to do is go ahead and play with my color balance. So color balance, it pulls up this window and it's just what you think. Do you want the image to be more cyan in tone? Do you want it to be more red in tone? Obviously, you're probably not going to go to those extremes. Most of your little carrots here will be slightly to the right or left. You're probably only going to make small adjustments. So do I want the image to be a little warmer? Do I need it to be a little cooler because it had more red values, yellow values, etc.? So you can kind of push and pull these to where you think you need them. A lot of times I like to look for a white value. So I look, in this case, it would be the marshmallows, and make sure the marshmallows aren't tinted something that I don't think they should be to get the correct color. All right, that looks pretty good. All right, so I would argue that this photo is finished and ready to go. And we're going to talk about saving in 1 second. But before we save, we're going to leave that open. And we are going to open up a new file. So I'm going to go to File, Open. I'm going to go ahead and pick something completely different. I'm going to go ahead and grab, let's see. I'll grab a couple things. I'm going to open up the popsicles. Okay, and oh, this is not the one I wanted. So I'm actually going to X that out. And this is going to happen to you too. those little tiny thumbnails sometimes are really difficult to see if that's what you wanted. And you can sort of change your viewpoint in your Macs so that's exactly how you want. And so that's what I just did. I just switched to icons instead of list view so that I could see what I was actually looking for. And it looks like I actually didn't take, oh, there's one. I'm going to go into the melty popsicles and grab those. All right, so I do have some correcting to do on this one. This picture turned out a little dark for my liking, so I definitely want to go ahead and play with my exposure a little bit. So using the tools that I showed you on the first one. And then maybe I even want to crop it. I kind of don't like how much is blurry in this photo. I think it's a little distracting. So I'm going to hold down Shift, and I'm on the crop tool, which is over here on the left. And as I hold down Shift, it's going to keep it in proportion of what the original photo shape was. And I'm going to go ahead and crop it down kind of far. And then I can kind of slide with it and adjust it. And I'm kind of using my grid to think about rule of thirds. And then I don't want everything to be in the smack dab middle. I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. So as I'm looking at this photo, I'm going to decide, like, I don't know. I don't think the melting popsicle really got captured as well as I wanted it to. So, I could leave that open and then maybe go and say, what, I'm going to go edit something else first, and maybe I'll come back to that if I'm feeling better about it later. And maybe, I figure out that that's one of my better options. So I'm going to go ahead and go into my phone photos. Because remember, I did take 2 different series of photos. And I'm purposely going to bring this one up. Okay, so I like how this picture turned out. However, I left a little bit in the background that I don't want to get rid of. So I'm still on my crop tool. So I'm going to hold down Shift again. And I'm going to crop some of this out. I'm going to get really close to that red jelly bean on the side. I'm going to bring this back a little bit. So I'm going to get rid of all that stuff that's got shaded out. So I'm going to hit return, and then voila, I've kind of helped my problem, right? I've gotten rid of a lot of stuff back here. But let's say I want to make this a little brighter. So it's already kind of bright in the background. I'm going to go ahead and go over here to these tools, and I'm going to use my dodge tool. Dodge meaning I'm going to take away some light, or sorry, I am sort of taking away exposure, and what's going to do is going to brighten up this back section. And your controls for that are up here. So it shows you your brush size and your hardness. So I have the hardness turned all the way down so it blends nicely. I could even lower my exposure so that it's a softer effect. And you can you zoom out and zoom in on Photoshop by hitting Command plus or Command minus. That's sort of a universal zoom in and out. And kind of I can address all of this stuff and really start to lighten up this background. Okay, but let's say I wanted to blur all of this out a little bit more too. I could go up here and I could use my blur tool. Same thing, I've got my strength, I've got my brush size, hardness, all of that good stuff. So it's gonna take a little bit for you to notice that it's actually happening since it's already a little bit blurry in the background, but we could blur this out even further so that our focus is really on these front jelly beans. All right, so that's kind of how you use the blur tool, and you're probably like, Mrs. Vance, I barely saw that. That's okay. I'm telling you, subtle is better. We don't want to necessarily really see it because we don't want to see any big lines or anything like that in Photoshop. We don't want anything to look like it was actually Photoshopped. That's kind of the mark of a great graphic designer and worker, is if like something is Photoshopped and it's done so well that it's hard for people to be able to tell. All right, so the last thing I'm going to do on this picture is come up and I'm going to go to my color balance. And I am going to make sure that, the jelly beans in the front are my priority. They still stay the color I want them to be. The bowl stays the color I want it to be. My table is not that red. I want it to stay more brown. So I'm looking kind of at this white cast in the background and making sure it stays pretty neutral. And the last thing I wanted to show you is under adjustments, I wanted to go to Hue and Saturation and show you what you can do with this. So you could have a little bit more fun with it if you're into Photoshop and want to play around a little bit more. This allows you to control different channels of color. So master means it's going to do everything and sort of average it out. Or I could choose one thing, like reds, and I could blow out any sort of red value or take away the color, and magically all those red jelly beans are now gray. Okay, so I could keep doing that until I only have, you know, just the yellow jelly beans showing or something like that. So I could take away all of that color. Let's go to cyan and get rid of that too. So now you can see that I'm just left with the yellows and a little bit in like those orangey ones that are showing. Get rid of that too. So you can kind of play around with that, but most likely this is not going to be a tool that you're going to want to use for this project. Okay, because we want to see the food. We want to like, you know, taste the food, know how good it is based on your photography of it. So the chances of you wanting to make something black and white are pretty small. Okay, so you're going to do this 5 times, right? You're going to open your pictures, you're going to go into them, you are going to adjust them the way you want them to be, and then you are going to submit. So I'm going to go ahead and open one more image. Okay, so for this one, you know, everything's in focus. I would maybe want to go into my color balance and watch like the sprinkles and make sure they stay white. Ask myself, like, did it skew a little warm or a little cold in the picture? So really looking at the whipped cream to kind of guide, is that really white using just my eyes? And for the most part, I didn't really make any big adjustments. I don't think there's money to make. What I do think I could make though is I think it's a little bit on the dark side. So I could maybe pump up my brightness and contrast a little bit just to really kind of make the texture of this ice cream pop here. I think it could be a little brighter. Okay, so I've got all these pictures open. I have 5 images. I didn't touch all of them in the tutorial, but you understand the concepts. So now I'm going to go back and I'm going to go to that first one. I'm going to double check that it's exactly how I want it. Do I need to crop it at all? So I could decide like, you know what, there is a little bit too much extra background. So maybe I hold down shift and I slide this over. So let me show you what not holding down shift looks like. So now I can kind of make it any shape I want. But the problem with that is you're going to end up turning in some weirdly shaped picture and not realize it, and it's just not going to look very good. All right, so I'm going to hold down shift, go ahead and hit return. And so I've just trimmed a little bit away from the image. All right, but I now think it's ready to go. So I'm going to go up to File, Save As, and you're going to do this for each picture. So instead of whatever file number came from your phone or your camera, you are going to put your name, so first and last, and then you're going to do photo 1. And then for the next one, I'll do photo 2. For the next one, I'll do photo 3. And I'm going to make sure I save them on my desktop so I know exactly where they are for when I go to turn it in. Then you can move them somewhere else after the fact. I'm making sure that the format is a JPEG. If for whatever reason you accidentally made a layer and it wants to save it as a Photoshop file, make sure you switch that so it says JPEG. It's super important. So I'm going to head and click save. I'm going to actually have to hit replace because I already did this demo once. That's okay. And then I'm going to hit OK again here. All right. So then I'm going to go to my second file. Okay. Then I'm going to go and notice that like, oops, this was the one I never wanted to turn in. Right. So I'm going to actually have to go back later and not turn that one in. So be wary of what you're saving and going into as you go. So again, file, save as, first name, last name. So this time I'll change it to my actual first name. And this is photo 2. Okay, I'm switching it to my desktop so I know where it is. Double checking my format is JPEG, clicking save, and then OK. And I'm going to do this for all 5 images. And then that way they are ready to go to be uploaded to Artsonia. Oh, so I'm back to this popsicle image. And maybe this is the best image I have left out of all my options. So I'm going to go back and say, OK, I am going to turn it in. Okay. You just need to have that editing eye. If you know you have other photos available for you to edit, open them up and look at them and hold them side by side and kind of toggle back and forth and ask yourself which one is better, which one is not. Go ahead and ask your parents, which one do you like the best? Which one should I turn in? Get a second opinion. There is no artist in the world that doesn't get some sort of opinion from someone else when they go to submit work for a museum, a gallery, all those good things. All right, so format is okay. I'm going to click OK again. and we're good to go. So I think you guys get the concept. So we're going to do this 5 separate times. It honestly didn't take me that long, right? So I don't expect it to take you that long. It really is going to come down to your images and how much editing needs to be done on each of them. It will be very apparent if you don't ever open up Photoshop and do this by hand, because if I know that your photos were a little bit yellow when we did the check-in and they're still yellow, I will then suggest to you, hey, you might want to go back in and color correct this. They're a little on the yellow side, unless that's what you're going for. That's just one example, but taking the time to do those small, small, small edits in Photoshop can make a big, big difference. Good luck, guys. Have fun. Email me if you have any questions. You got this.